everyone. This is part 3 of the emotional self. So, since we already have discussed emotions, its functions, and how important we are to deal with our emotions as human being, um, we will talk about how we are to deal with our emotional self. So, since adolescence is considered a turbulent time of development due to biological, psychological, and social changes that adolescents experience and encounter, no, understanding more of our emotional self is very important. Now, I would like to add on emotional regulation. So, we need to establish our emotional efficacy and emotional maturity. Emotional regulation is defined as an attempt to influence emotion. So, this can be applied to ourselves or to other people we interact with. Okay, while emotional regulation can occur for both positive and negative emotions, it is often used to negate impact of the unpleasant emotion. According to Gross 1987, emotional regulation may take two forms: cognitive reappraisal and suppression. So the first one is cognitive reappraisal. This involves evaluation of the situation prior to making personal subjective valuation about it. So in this way, we are able to manage how we feel by using reason to appraise the situation. So this is very important to note because sometimes we react right away because we are emotional. So according to this theory, we need to appraise the situation before we respond to it, because this approach can be very helpful because it allows us to be logical in the situation instead of being ruled over by our emotions. So sige na gid ni ninyo madunggan no na before ta mag-react, we have to inhale and exhale or take a pause for a while before we deal with our triggered emotion. Kung ingon pa sa bago nga mga generation, triggered. Okay. So, also, we already have heard na do not make promises when you are happy, and you do not take or make decisions when you are sad, because again, that might be emotionally influenced and you might regret it in time. The second form is suppression. Okay, so suppression involves denial and masking of facial expression to hide one's current emotional state. So, medyo siya pangit paminawon, but it has positive consequences because when we try to hide pain, the feeling is less likely to be painful. So, suppression is actually you are aware and you are controlling your emotions. So, wala ka diretsyo na suko, wala ka diretsyo ni react, wala ka diretsyo ni singka, but instead, you try to cover that and mask it and tawag ani imuha siyang gitry og hide. Okay. So in certain situations, expressing how we feel will not always have positive outcome. So kung i-compare nimo sa nisingka ka dayon, so naglalis mo, nag-away mo. Whereas later na hinay-hinay lang kang nagpagawa sa imong gibati or even gi-forget gid nimo siya, then that could be a practical option in some cases. Though there are cases that we really have to deal and express our emotions, suppression comes when you are trying to save a situation ba na further siyang ma-harm, maging harmful sa imo or sa imo ang reakan or sa other people involved in that situation. So again, no, it is very important that we know how to regulate our emotions, no? Okay, so dealing with our emotional self. So take note that many of us focus a great deal of time and attention in improving our bodies and making ourselves more attractive. Yet, for all the time and money spent on dieting, exercise or gym, clothes, and cosmetic surgery, Many still do not like who they see in the mirror. There is always something that needs to be changed or improved. People who are critical of how they look are usually critical of other aspects of themselves as well. So we just discuss physical self. So it also affects no, the aspect of ourselves emotionally. So they tend to focus on their flaws rather than their assets, and they are seldom pleased with their performance, whether it's at work, at school, or in a relationship. Now, there is nothing wrong with wanting to improve yourself. Everyone suffers from time to time with self critical thoughts. But some people have such low self esteem that they are never satisfied with their achievements, their physical appearance, or their performance. They have a relentless inner critic who constantly tears them down and robs them of any satisfaction they might temporarily feel when they have reached a goal. So before I proceed, let us first define self-esteem. So we will define self-esteem again and again and again. You have already heard this from the earlier parts, but again, I'd like to go over that because is where we are to have our discussion. So self-esteem is how you feel about yourself as a person, your overall judgment of yourself. Na your self-esteem may be high or low depending on how much you like or approve of yourself. Please take note of that. So if you have a high self-esteem, you have an appreciation of the full extent of your personality. This means that you can accept yourself for who you are, with both your good qualities and not so good qualities. It can be assumed that you have self-respect, self-love, and feelings of worth. You don't need to impress other people because you already know you have a value. I have been telling this to my class, and I have been telling this over and over to my friends, no? That we should know our self-worth and we should know our value. So knowing self-worth and giving value to ourselves comes from within. So we should not ask that from other people. We should not depend that on other people, but instead we know that we have our value. Now, our feelings of self-worth form the core of our personality. Nothing is as important to our psychological well being. The level of our self esteem affects virtually every aspect of our lives. So, very important ang ato ang pagtanaw sa atong kaugalingon because it eventually affect all aspects of our lives. For example, it affects how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us and how they subsequently treat us. So it comes from you. How you see yourself will give others an idea how they are to perceive you as well as to treat you. It also affects our choices in life, no? From our careers to whom we befriend or get involved with romantically. So, usually, why do we choose these people as our group, as our friend, or this person as our boyfriend or girlfriend? Because it goes back to how you see yourself. Now, it influences how we get along with others and how productive we are, as well as how much use we make of our aptitudes and abilities. Do we acknowledge our skills? No? Do we share our talents because we have a good self-esteem or a high self-esteem, or even you have a talent, you are shy to share it with others because you have low self-esteem. You see, there is always a domino effect on our self-esteem. Now, it also even affect our ability to take action when things need to be changed in our ability to be creative. So it also affects how we take in criticisms. No, if others give you a feedback, If you know your worth and that you know that you have a value and that you have a high self esteem, then you will be able to evaluate the criticism, and if there is a need, then you may start slowly with the changes that you need to take. No? It also affects our stability, and it even affects whether we tend to be a follower or become a leader when we are put in a situation that needs you to follow or to lead. Ayan. So again, our self-esteem is very important, that it affects all aspects of our lives. Now, many of the ideas we have about ourselves were acquired in childhood from two sources: how others treated us and what others told us about ourselves. So medyo diri na lisod jud ni siya kaayo, no, because the words from the people who are important matters. The treatment you have received from your home also matters. So, how others define us has become how we now perceive ourselves nowadays, no? So, your self-image or your self-esteem is a package that you have put together from how others have seen and treated you, and from the conclusions you drew in comparing yourself to others. So, that is very important that we we have established a good self-esteem or high self-esteem. Pero yun nga lang, if you were raised with a lot of things na happening during childhood, conflict in the family, financial problem, and the rest, so still, it may affect how we perceive ourselves. So later, we'll discuss that. Nag-una-una na pod ko. Now, our self esteem is the measure of how much we like and approve of our self concept. Another way of thinking about it is that self esteem is how much respect you have for yourself, while self image is how you see yourself. Now, the real cause of our low self esteem or negative self image, ayun ang sabi ko, that we will discuss this. Nag-una-una lang ko ganina gamay. Okay. So, the primary cause of our self esteem or low self esteem or negative self image probably goes back to our childhood. No matter what happened to you in your life, your parents or the people who raised you have the most significant influence on how you feel about yourself. No? Negative parental behavior and messages can have a profound effect on our self-image and self-esteem. This is especially true to survivors of emotional abuse, neglect, or other kinds of traumatic experiences. Now, inadequate, unhealthy childhood experiences can affect the formation of child's identity, self concept, and level of self esteem. Research clearly shows that the single most important factor in determining the amount of self esteem a child starts out with his or her parents' style of child rearing during the first 3 or 4 years of the child's life. So you see, when your parents are loving, encouraging, fair minded, and provide proper discipline and set of appropriate limits, no? Children may be shaped with good feelings of themselves. They become confident. They are even able to monitor their behavior because rules are already set. So meaning you have been raised as a disciplined person, no? Especially if empathic pa pud imong parents. But when parents are somehow not so empathic, no, and they become neglectful with their reasons, or critical, no, or unfair, or even harshly discipline their children, or inappropriate limits are given, no, this will affect the children's ability to establish themselves as well. So children of this from this kind of experiences may develop to be insecure, no? May grow insecure, no, self-critical, and most likely suffer from low self-esteem. So at least now we are able to identify the factors, but we are not to blame them. Just identify and acknowledge, and again, if this will make you realize your value and your worth, then maybe it is a time, no, it is time to change how we look at ourselves and how we put value to ourselves at the same time. Now, it is very important that you or we reconnect with our body and our emotions. How are we to do that? No? As according to Marion Woodman, what you know in your head will not sustain you in moments of crisis. Confidence comes from body awareness, knowing what you feel in the moment. Yan, we have to take note of that. Now, the most effective way to reclaim all your emotions, pain, anger, fear, guilt, shame, joy, and love, is to begin to pay attention to your body. Now, even when you unconsciously repress your feelings, your body remembers them. And that's what we call body memories. Mubitaw na, pag naay time na makafeel ka nga pas-pas ang imong heartbeat, you become anxious or frightened or mag-tremble imong body because the brain associates that responses to a traumatic experience or sad feelings, no? So maka-remember atong body sa atoang emotions. Now, um, your body remembers what it felt like when you were neglected, criticized, rejected, or beaten, no, or pained when you were a child. So for each emotion, your body experiences a different set of physical sensations, and it remembers with stiffness, constrictions, and tensions the pain and anger you felt when you were a child. So it is best that you allow yourself to reconnect with your body, to let it express and release all the pain from childhood. So we have to acknowledge that we were hurt and we have to express it. No, no more repression this time. So your body hurts, bleeds, tingles, or tightens for a reason, and it is trying to tell you something, no? Kulbaan ka or gisingot ka nga wala ka kasabot nga gakulbaan ka ayo ka. So try to deal with that because it is it is reminding you of the kinds of childhood trauma you experience. So sometimes we need to listen to our body and its message, no? So one of the most effective ways to discovering who you are is to pay attention to your emotions. In fact, some define self-awareness as being conscious of our moods and our thoughts about our moods. Again, some define self-awareness as being conscious of our moods and our thoughts about our moods. Very important. So again, you have to take a neutral stance, a non-reactive, non-judgmental stance when you observe your emotions. So dili sa ka mag-react diretso. So it helps to take a slight step back from your experience so that you can be aware of what you are feeling rather than immersed in it. Now, rather than just feeling it without understanding its message. So marong nato na siya og perceive, marong pud na nato siya og express. So according to Daniel Goleman, from his book Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, he said self-awareness, recognizing a feeling as it happens, is the keystone of emotional intelligence. The ability to monitor feelings from moment to moment is crucial to psychological insight and understanding. People with greater certainty about their feelings are better pilots of their lives, having a surer sense of how they really feel about personal decisions. Now, however, no, for many who have been neglected and abused in childhood, emotions are a frightening thing. No? It was when their parents or our parents' emotions got out of hand that we got yelled at or pushed or hit. No, it was when children even got angry and started to cry that they were ridiculed, punished, or abandoned. No, so we don't like these feelings because it reminds us of how we were treated before. No, so for this reason, most survivors of abuse and neglect tend to deny and repress their true emotions. Even the ones who may appear to be extremely emotional, eruptive, or volatile are usually denying their more vulnerable feelings underneath. So, if you were neglected or abused in childhood, you will tend to be overwhelmed and controlled by your emotions. So, that's how we need to learn, know how we are to regulate our emotions because many people are so overwhelmed that their emotions become their enemies. Now, take note, dysfunctional behaviors, including abusive or victim like patterns, substance abuse, and suicidal tendencies, are often attempts to cope with intolerably painful emotions. So many try to regulate their emotions by trying to make themselves not feel whatever it is that they feel. So this style is a direct result of the emotionally invalidating environment that they were raised in, which mandated that people should smile when they are unhappy, be nice and not rock the boat when they are angry, and confess or beg for forgiveness even when they don't feel they did anything wrong. So take note, because of these behaviors, we tend to have ended up feeling sideswiped by our own emotions or overwhelmed when emotions build up. This in turn may cause us to project our feelings onto others. So mona siya na even if we do not like how we feel, of the memories of these emotions, we have to understand, no? This has happened in the past and it might affect you, but you are now grown up and trying to make a life that you have to know how to regulate your emotions. Another one is reconnecting with our feelings even if we don't like it, no, if we try to process our emotions, our experiences in childhood, when we try to reconnect with the feelings, it can even provide us with strength, courage, and joy, no. So ma'am, ingon ka kaganina kay mahadlok ta mag-deal sa atong emotions, truly, because it will remind us of the negative, not so good memories we had. But if we are courageous enough to at least process that, and this might help you, no, help you gain, strength, courage, and joy. And you may also need someone's help, no, an adult or your pastor or your priest or whoever that can help you process this. It is very good. This will help you um, stop labeling your emotions as good or bad. Remember, with our first part, there is no good and bad emotions, but it's how we interpret it. So, when we reconnect with our feelings, especially with those that connects to our childhood experiences, it will help us stop labeling emotions as good or bad, and instead we see them as important messages that can indicate about ourselves, our circumstances, and our environment. So, if we reconnect with these feelings, we will be able to begin to see that our emotions can empower us to take better care of ourselves, and in doing so, help us raise our self esteem. So again, if we understand that these emotions are just normal, we in an abnormal situation that we are scared when we are yelled at, but it has already happened in our childhood, and we have to acknowledge that we are now, no, a surviving individual. If we reconnect our feelings, then we will be able to um, help ourselves, no, and even establish a better self-esteem. Now, learning about your emotion yourself through your emotion. So this is very important because the key to learning about yourself through your emotion is to experience them without inhibiting, judging, or avoiding them by distracting yourself. And that is called being mindful. Okay, so instead of fighting our emotions or walling them off, being mindful of them can help us discover more about who we really are. So, fill up your emptiness with your own feelings. So, because of your low self esteem or our low self esteem, like many other survivors of emotional abuse or deprivation, um, many people have probably searched for something outside ourselves for a sense of completion and a sense of being worthwhile. So, people may have looked for romantic love as a solution for feelings of incompleteness and inadequacy. But please take note that no one but yourself can complete you, fill up your emptiness, or give you a sense of meaning. So, again, if you give yourself the time and space to get to know yourself and your feelings, you will find that you will fill up that emptiness, a layer at a time. Each time you allow yourself to feel a feeling, each time you allow yourself to express an emotion, you are filling up another empty space inside you. Ayan. So it is very important that we fill in, no, or fill up that emptiness, and we should not take it from other people. And of course, let's try to um, establish, no, embrace who you really are. So as a child, we learned what was required from us in order to be liked and accepted by our parents. The result was that we become fixated on an ideal but distorted sense of ourselves. This ideal self become an internal image of how we believe we should be, so that everything will turn out alright, and we will be loved, accepted, and appreciated. So this ideal self-image includes personal standards of action, thought, feeling, behavior, appearance, and accomplishment. Now, the biggest difficulty with pursuing our ideal self-image is that it doesn't work. No, I believe you now understand what is idealized self-image, because we already have discussed Carl Rogers, no, the ideal self and the real self. So, why is it very difficult to achieve that ideal self-image? No, no. So, although striving for the ideal as a child may have brought you parental approval, it did little to give you inner peace. So maybe your parents were pleased or happy when you were trying to strive that ideal self image. But how about you? Are you happy with that? Are you contented with that? No? Did that give you inner peace? So the strain of constantly comparing yourself to the ideal is anxiety provoking and very exhausting, because it is impossible to reach an ideal. We are bound to fail, and we always find ourselves lacking, deficient, or good or not good enough. So this sets us up for more shame and guilt. Even though the ideal may be worthy, at some point we need to question just how good it is when we use it as a way to continually reject ourselves. So instead, now that we are trying to embrace adulthood, you are in the process of developing yourself, try to check if that ideal self image gives you inner peace and that it gives you confidence. Then you can go on and try to reach that. But if that self image or ideal self image somehow makes you anxious, or even you are not happy doing that or achieving that, then it is best that we try to embrace who we really are in a way that we become the better version of ourselves. So, again, thank you for listening. God bless and stay safe.